All right, hi. We are going to look at the force field analysis now. This is a super useful tool for multiple things in the class. It forces analysis, it forces evaluation, and oftentimes is used in students' internal assessments when there is a change. So if you are going to use change as your core concept, this is going to be a tool that most likely will be shown in your internal assessment. Additionally, it's really easy to use through the AO3 framework, just more in a organized tool, an organized tool. So we are going to, again, if you need to pause, go to the toolkit, get your um, lesson or a notability if you've already downloaded it for one of the other lessons. This is all in the same slideshow, just different videos. So we are looking at the force field analysis at this point. Oops. Okay, so again, back to our objectives. We are looking at this to be able to analyze and construct these tools. So analyze again, we're looking at how do we read it? Do we understand what it says? What's happening in this situation? Constructing it is going to be creating it, drawing it out. That's the AO4 part. So if you click right on the force field analysis link, it will take you to this part of the slideshow and you will be able to find that. If not, you need to pause and make sure you are getting to the right spot. All right, a force field analysis. This is a change planning tool. So we are looking at a change, any change in the business, and we're going to look at the pressures for and against that change in a situation. It is really like a fancy pro cons list. So I'm sure many of you have created a pros cons list in the past to make a decision. A force field analysis is a very similar type of tool to do that. So we're looking at our change situation. All right, driving forces are forces for change or like our pros. Restraining forces act against the change and they're like our cons. So we really are looking at what those pros and cons of a decision are, and it really, going back to the curriculum forces analysis, positives and negatives, again, works very well for the AO3 framework. All right, so this is an example of a force field analysis. It's the best one I think that teaches you how it looks. There are some things I don't necessarily love about it. However, just bear with some of those as we go through it. All right, so this is an example of a company that is looking for the change to upgrade their factory with new manufacturing equipment. So they're looking to upgrade potentially. Again, are we going to make this change? Well, there are many tools out there to determine how you're going to make the change. However, this one is really going to flush out all of the driving forces for it and then all of the restraining forces against it. One of the bigger mistakes students make right at the beginning is you label the top of each column driving forces and restraining forces. So making sure you're using those terms as opposed to positives, negatives, or pros, cons. So we're looking at the correct terminology here. So driving forces, restraining forces, and then we are looking at the change being in the middle of the force field analysis. So that is, again, one of those things that's super important that we're constructing it correctly to the AO4 level. Driving forces, restraining forces labeled above each column, and then upgrading with new equipment. As you will see to the left, where we have our driving forces, we will list those out. You do not need to draw them in big block arrows, but you will have arrows that go across to that, and you can write it on top. These are pretty succinct, making sure that there's clarity to them, but they don't have to be full sentences. And so in this situation, we will say customers want new products. Okay, so that's a driving force. Customers are wanting new products, well, then we need to upgrade our equipment. And you will see there are multiple ones that you can look at. On the restraining forces side, you will also see that there are negatives to this decision. So maybe my staff is fearful of a change. Typically, staff is fearful of changes. And so you will see that. And we have those listed on those side. These do not need to be equal. That is one of the things that students say, do we need to have balance among it? No, there may be more driving forces or restraining forces in this, and that's totally okay. You are brainstorming as many as you can think of that will impact the business. After you have those brainstormed, you need to give them a weight. This is really important to understand. This is not a ranking. This is not the first to the fourth or fifth most important. This is a weight to determine how important each factor is. Your factors could have the same weights on the same side, or they could be different. And that is one of the things I don't love about this one is it looks like I'm ranking, but I'm not. As you can see on this side, on the restraining force side, we don't have anything that looks like a rank. It's just simply weighting. The weights are from 1 to 5. So we are looking at 1 being the lowest weight, 5 being the highest, and everything in between. So I will say if it's not that important of a factor or a force, it's usually a 1 or a 2. If it's kind of neutral, we go 3. If it's pretty important and you think it's a big deal, 4 or 5. And so when we look at that, you will give those each a weight. Then you will total them at the bottom of each column. And so you will see the totals of the weights. At that point, just from this tool alone, it shows us that the restraining forces outweigh the driving forces. And so I'm not going to make the decision no just on this. However, this would lead me to believe that maybe it's something I shouldn't do. So here are a couple of reminders. You can make your arrows the same length. They don't need to be in these big boxes. They can just be arrows on the same length. Don't forget to total each column. This is the biggest mistake on the tests. When students are constructing these, they end up forgetting this total. Don't forget that weightings are not rankings. They are weights. How much each weight for each factor, 1 through 5. And then making sure that you're using the correct terms to label each column, driving forces and restraining forces, as opposed to pros, cons, or positives, negatives. All right, so here's what we do to carry them out. You will definitely have the change in the middle of your force field. You will list those factors, forces for, change, and against. Allocate a weight to each of these forces, 1 to 5. Again, 1, 2, pretty weak. 3, pretty neutral. 4, 5, pretty strong. We'll draw that diagram showing the forces for and against change. We'll total our columns. Then we are going to substantiate our weights below. This is something we are going to talk more about in class and in person, but we need to be able to support our weights through some sort of analysis. In your internal assessments, you will definitely need to support your weights through research. Why did you give something a 4? Why is it that high of a force versus a 1 or a 2? And so that is a more sophisticated conversation that we will have in person in class. Okay. So this allows us to assess the forces and gives a clear answer, even though when I say clear, take that with a grain of salt. We have to use it with other tools as well. It is really flexible and simple. It works for any change situation. It's pretty qualitative in nature, but we have that quantitative effect with the weight, so it is a little bit more versatile than some other tools. The biggest disadvantage is those weightings could be subjective. Managers may choose to have a little bias in certain areas or feel something should go a certain way. And so those weightings can be subjective. So when they are done, they should be grounded in research and studied as opposed to just gut feelings. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the main front slide again. We will practice this in class. But as you can see, I gave you a template that came from our Kerboodle textbook that talks a little bit about how to create them and gives you a little bit of a template for them if you are looking how to create them in a simplistic manner. So that template is given to you as well at the front of this slideshow. That is it for the force field analysis. We will continue practicing as we come into class later. Thank you.